what are Reliance's plans on two fronts. One, of course, is the Reliance Jio Finance. JioFin, of course, has been losing almost 5% on a daily basis all of last week, barring Friday. So Reliance is going to be in focus today. Add to that SEBI's report to the Supreme Court tomorrow. Adani stocks, all Adani stocks, Adani Enterprises, ports, power will be in focus. JSW finally coming out clearly saying that it is winning or getting into the EV space, hoping to win some business of MG Motors through a stake pickup. That is in news today. So I think all of these are going to develop and we will see some action definitely in the markets today.
All right, and let's quickly rope in our guest to perhaps weigh in on what is going to drive markets this morning. Joining us is Sanjeev Hota, who's the VP and Head of Research at Sharekhan. Sir, thanks very much for taking time out. I want to begin by asking Mr. Hota, what exactly is your... Let's start by talking about the global cues first. Jackson Hole Symposium, a close watch there. Markets were down, not just in India, but also globally. Now that Jerome Powell has come out and stated categorically that it's going to be a hawkish stance going forward, how are you expecting global cues to affect Indian markets this morning?
Hi, good morning. So what I read from the Jackson Hole, is my voice is echoing?
No, we can hear you loud and clear.
Fine. Yeah, thanks. So what I read from the Jackson Hole is that it was both on the dovish side as well as on the hawkish side. So I don't really see anything changes from what the narrative is already been built by the market. So Powell commentary, if you see it, nothing like, as you mentioned, that it was totally hawkish. It was on the dovish side as well. But the market is still uncertain about how long this Fed is go on hiking the rate. That is the one thing that market is worrying. At the same time that the China factor is playing out quite well because the deflation is happening over there. And that is a bigger problem that the market is now anticipating to happen over the next few months to come. So that is the reason I believe that even if there's a sell-off on Friday in our market, the Nasdaq was higher on Friday in US market. Jackson Hole commentary was both on the neutral side. But then again, the market is not able to stay in green and it's remained volatile. Because I believe that near-term headwind is more than the near-term tailwinds. So that is the reason I believe market, is continue to remain volatile, at least in the short term.
Okay, Mr. Hota, what about the IT stocks? We are seeing Nifty IT has opened in the red this morning. Is it US inflation concerns weighing in on Indian IT stocks?
I don't really think that IT stocks are reacting to what happened in the Jackson Hole commentary. I believe that I keep on saying that the price damage has already been done in the IT stock in the last 1 year or so. And so valuation, if you see, is still sitting at a very, very reasonable level. The problem is nobody knows about how the earnings is going to land up in FY24 and 25. Because still the banks across the world are not much in a good shape. And our interaction with the management suggesting that the second half of this year is going to be a very challenging. And although there's an expectation that flush of business is going to come in Q3 earlier, but now our interaction with management suggesting that they may not happening. So the earning volatility or earning uncertainties is still there very much in the IT sector, along with the margin pressure. So price damage has already been done, but I don't really think any major outperformance happening in the IT sector. Few of the stock that I like for the investment level only in the IT space, in the top I like TCS being the largest player, and they have the capability to sustain this kind of headwinds. And only because of this valuation factor, I like Birlasoft in the mid to small cap space.
All right, let's move to stocks specifically, and one of the stocks or a group of stocks that we continue to track here is Adani, of course, and we'll move to others later. But Adani stocks also in news, not just on the back of the fact that SEBI is going to tender its final report, but we're also given to understand, Karthik, a part of the report has already been submitted as of Friday in Supreme Court, where investigation is complete partly of the 24 clauses or 24 I think ideas that SEBI was investigating. partly investigation is finished, only 2 are remaining. The entire report is expected to be submitted in Supreme Court on 29th, which is tomorrow. So all eyes, of course, will be on Adani there. Adani stocks have, recuperated some of its losses, but were trading slightly in the red as of Friday. They're picking up this morning. What are you hoping and what is your stance on Adani stocks at this point, Mr. Hota?
To put out a disclaimer, we do not have official coverage on Adani from Sharekhan BNP Paribas. But to give a broader sense on what is happening in Adani, this entire group stock always react very in a wide margin to what is happening in the news in the market. So as you rightly mentioned, SEBI has, if you read the report, SEBI has mostly cleared their finding out of 22, and 2 finding that was remain is not from the SEBI, from the global agency, and they are waiting for that. So it is a positive note from a sense that now they are getting a total clearance from the SEBI. But there are other
can you
news
say
that
it's a total clearance at this point in time, Mr. Hota? Have you read the report yourself?
Yeah, what I'm reading that out of 24, 22 was the SEBI finding, and out of 22 they have given a clear clearance to the Adani. But 2 that are remaining is from the global agencies, and that what we are waiting for. So that is what I have read in the report.
So basically, these are speculative reports in media. The report that SEBI has actually submitted in the Supreme Court is not yet out, is my understanding.
Yeah, that is what I'm reading from the media. That is the reason I'm saying that there are other reports that are pending from the SEBI as well. And that is what the market is speculating. So if you read some other media report, there could be some, I was reading some media report that was talking about putting a ban on the Adani Group promoter from the capital market from the SEBI. So there are lots of speculation that is happening around the Adani. So, and it is highly speculative, stock that per se. So that is the reason I would don't like to comment on the Adani Group stock, because I don't have the coverage and the volatility is huge. So I believe the retail investors should keep away from that, and the institutional investors have their own allocation in this. But for Adani Group stock, I would like to say that retail investors should keep out of that because of the huge volatility.
But we are definitely seeing action on Adani stocks, Shweta. Of course, the report that came out in the media, of course, tomorrow is going to be the big day. 29th August is when the report would actually be tabled in the Supreme Court and will be presented to the Supreme Court. Now, that is when we will see some positive action on whichever direction the Adani stocks might take. Right now, I think all this is stemming out of mostly out of speculation. Investors believing, both retail as well as global institutional investors believing that the SEBI panel has given a clean sheet to Adani. We don't know yet. I think we should wait till tomorrow to see what comes out of that report, and only then I think should we be able to delve deeper into the Adani stocks.
In my understanding, before we move on, I think it's highly unlikely that SEBI will be able to conclude the 2 ongoing investigation, because as Mr. Hota also pointed out, it really depends on cooperation of international agencies. So whether that will happen tomorrow or not, but so far the report that has already been submitted in Supreme Court, will have to wait for the fine prints of that. But all eyes, of course, will be on tomorrow's hearing, when SEBI will either furnish its final report or perhaps will clarify on whether there's going to be a report in the interim or not. But shifting focus now to Reliance. Reliance AGM, and a lot of expectations there from the AGM, not just with regards to the business model of Jio Financial Services, but also Adani, Reliance's, I beg your pardon, 5G plans ahead. So all eyes will be, of course, on Reliance stock today.
So what am I really looking forward to understanding from the AGM today, Shweta? Of course, in addition to the telecom business, in addition to the rollout of 5G across the country, which I think is obvious that is going to happen. You talk Reliance, you cannot ignore Jio, and Jio not just in its other forms, but the traditional Jio cellular, right? So Jio is going to be big in the AGM today. The market should expect some clarification on JioFin, Jio Financial Services. What is the business model? Where is it headed? How long before it comes into operations as a company, as a pure play operating entity, and not just a book value company? So I think some clarification on JFS should definitely come in today. In addition to that, Reliance Retail has been a hotbed of investments. We've seen from QIA to multiple brands that Reliance Retail has partnered with, who are setting up shop in India, and Reliance Retail also going across the entire width of the market and really opening up both online as well as offline channels of retail. So Reliance Retail, perhaps some demerger now of Reliance Retail could be on the cards. We don't know if that is slated as the agenda or not. But right now, whatever action that you see in retail or whatever action you see in Jio, the stock that takes the impact mostly positively is the Reliance stock. But there's no way yet for an investor to be able to directly invest only in the Reliance Retail business. So could there be a Reliance Retail demerger? That is something we'll have to wait and watch for. But both JFS, JioFin as well as Reliance Retail, these should be clear-cut focus areas on the AGM today.
All right. So Reliance and JioFin, both stocks are going to be in focus. Mr. Hota, any merit to demerging the retail business? Its valuations are higher. There's a lot of investment coming in. Do you see any merit in Reliance now separating its retail business from its other businesses?
What market is expecting, because if you see the last year AGM, the board has clearly stated that this year AGM they are going to give some kind of roadmap for the demerger or the listing of the digital arm of Reliance, that is Jio, and retail as well. So the investors are hoping this time around will get some more clarity on the roadmap, how the demerger could happen and what is the timeline, and when the investor can hope to get this delisting of the demerger happening. But having said that, how I look for the Reliance is that there's a bigger story also playing out in this hydrogen space or the new energy space, where the Reliance is investing close to 75,000 odd crore. And if you see the current valuation, it is only contributing to almost 150, 200 rupees to the SOTP valuation of Reliance. But the big area where the Reliance is putting is money. So this business itself is going to grow rapidly over next, if you see 5 to 8 years down the line. So all the businesses together, the new energy business or the digital business, retail business, early days of this geofinancial business, all these businesses together can become huge in next 5 to 10 years, I believe. So Reliance is one of the interesting stock to hold for long term, and I believe that most of the shareholders will get ample outperformance happening in this stock.
What are your specific views on JioFin or Jio Financial Services, Mr. Hota? We haven't yet been able to look at a business plan, a business model for Jio Financial Services. So are you expecting it to be an AMC? Are you expecting it to be a pure play NBFC? What do you have really? What is your research telling you about JioFin?
It is the early days for Jio Financial Services, and why only one should hope for Reliance getting into the AMC business. They already signed up with the BlackRock for the AMC business, but they already have the tied up with almost 17 insurance companies for the distribution of insurance. So they have their already businesses on the insurance side as well. So and knowing Reliance, I believe, and the deep pocket they have, they can build ancillary business around Jio Financial Services, and it could be huge. If you see the big picture of the Jio Financial Services, they can disrupt any of this finance industry going forward. But it is too early days to take a call on how and when they are going to do this. But knowing Reliance, I believe that they must be having a big plan for this Jio Financial Services. But first of all, they need to build a leadership in place. They need to put it to build a business. But it is very interesting to see what they are going to say today in the AGM for Jio Financial Services. But as on today, I believe it's too early to take a call on the Jio Financial Services.
All right, too early to take a call, but all eyes, of course, on Reliance AGM today. Another stock that is going to be in focus and is in focus this morning is JSW. We are given to understand steel baron Sajjan Jindal could be picking up as much as 40 to 45% stake in MG Motors. Now, this was speculation. Is there some confirmation coming in now, Karthik?
There isn't still a confirmation. I think it is still pretty much source-based, reports which are coming in. There hasn't really been a clear-cut announcement made by JSW to this effect yet. But yeah, those sort of reports started flooding in again over the weekend. So there is my understanding that there are talks between Sargent Jindal's led JSW and MG Motors. MG Motors, of course, being a Chinese brand operating in India, manufacturing in, not to that level yet in India, but definitely selling in India. And it is definitely looking for an Indian partner. JSW, while in the backwardly integrated steel industry, is not yet in the automobile industry. And this could be a for JSW, not just into the auto sector, but into the EV space when it comes to automobiles. And that is one of the, the big bulks of business when it comes to MG Motors. So picking up some stake in MG Motors could kickstart this journey of JSW getting into the pure play automotive industry and in the pure play EV space. So JSW stocks again were also in the green this morning when we checked. Let's check with Mr. Hota. Mr. Hota, does it make sense for JSW to actually get into the auto sector, and any further confirmation that your team has on this acquisition of stake in MG Motors?
No, I was also reading this news from last 2 months or so that few others names are also there in the media report that they are picking stake in the MG Motors. But I don't know really that whether it is the JSW Steel which is bidding for the stake in MG Motor, or the JSW Group which is bidding for the MG Motor. But it is true that it is on the card. But who is going to take over the MG Motor? I really don't know and don't have the confirmation currently. So I would not like to speculate on whether it is going to be JSW or some other guy coming in. But EVs are a very interesting space for overall. If you see the huge white space and runway for growth in the EV space is very huge. And JSW being a big group, they would also like to put their money in this EV space. And it's the right move to happen if they were going to take MG Motor stake. But whether it is come under the JSW Steel or JSW Group, it is very speculative for now. So I would not like to speculate on that.
Okay, let's continue with the EV space, and Mr. Hota, and let's talk about TVS. TVS, of course, last week had announced its electric scooter for as high as 2.5 lakh rupees. That is more expensive than the new Harley Davidson launched with Hero MotoCorp.
Right, but it's not just targeted for India, it's for the global market.
That's right, it's targeted for the global market as well. So TVS, again, getting big into the EV space. In fact, yesterday, reports that came in late last night said that up to 4,000 crore rupees could be invested by TVS to build its EV plant. So, Mr. Hota, what do you make of TVS at this moment?
TVS is a one stock in the two-wheeler space, which are the early movers in this EV space. And if you see in the PV, it was Tata Motors, and in the two-wheeler space, it was TVS Motor who was the early movers in the EV space. And they are building up capability both through organically and inorganically. And the launches they are doing is quite on the premium side, as you rightly put out. And I believe that this space is huge, and it is still a very, very early day. We are just scratching the surface now, and this space can become huge going forward. As I am talking about the Indian market, global market, it is already picking up, but for the Indian market, it's still very early days. The price discovery is still happening. So I believe that TVS is also planning to sell some stake in their EV businesses, and that will give them more money to invest further in the EV business. And that is the reason why we are seeing that TVS is trading at a much premium valuation to what other two-wheeler players are trading at, and the market is believing that they can deliver on this business.
Okay, what are the other EV stocks that you have on your radar, Mr. Hota? Of course, M&M also continuing to make these announcements sporadically about ramping up its EV space. But specifically, do you have any other calls on the EV space hotting up in India?
One stock that is clearly playing out in the EV space is the Tata Motors. I think they have their money in the right place now. The Tata Motors is one stock which is like, in a sense that most of their triggers are playing out. So Tata Motors still looks very good to me for investment, not only for the EV space but for the other GLR space also. So that is one stock I like in the this whole PV and CV space. Apart from that, from EV ancillary space, if you see Gabriel India is one stock which I like in the smaller mid-cap company which are supplying to the two-wheelers. And other than that, I think Varroc is one stock, though we do not have the coverage in that stock. But Varroc is one stock in the EV space, apart from the DIVG of the world. Sona, BLW, all these companies are going to gain if this TVS or other players come into this EV space in an aggressive way. All these ancillary players which are supplying parts to this player are going to gain much from this announcement or this execution that is going to happen forward.
Okay, and before we let you go, Mr. Hota, Prime Minister yesterday at the B20 gathering organized by CII also mentioned the role of climate tech and
green
energy companies sort of, you know, firing on all cylinders, and those cylinders of course being the non-polluting ones. What do you have in store for our audiences, for investors listening to us on the clean energy space?
Yeah, so green energy, as I said, Reliance is also putting his money in the new energy or the green energy space, and it's a huge space where the government itself is putting its money and giving incentives to the player. So apart from the Reliance, I believe NTPC is one company which is clearly putting more and more incremental capex in this business, and this could be huge going forward into next 5 to 10 years. And stock is trading at 1.2 times book value. So NTPC is one company which I like in this green energy space.
And what's your take on green energy stocks in the medium to long term?
Oh, you cannot put a earning out coming out of the green energy in the near term, because most of these companies are now building capability and putting capex in the this green energy or the new energy space. It is too early day to expect a earning delivery to happen out of the green energy, but this is where the incremental earning or the sustainable earning that is going to emerge in next 5 to 7 years, and that is the reason market is very excited about the companies which are building capability or putting more incremental capex in this business.
Mr. Hota, thanks very much, sir, for taking time out for joining us this morning. We will come back to you as and when we can, but shifting focus, in fact, staying on with Prime Minister. Let's stay on with Prime Minister. A lot of other things that he said, Karthik, apart from just the green energy. He also talked about a global framework for crypto. He talks in great details about sustainable industrial development. Run us through the big key takeaways.
So, Shweta, I think, you know, India is, of course, as we all know, India is the president of G20 and B20 that was held from Friday to Sunday. The last 3 days was obviously a big ticket event organized by CII, where among, you know, other dignitaries, we of course had Prime Minister Narendra Modi also taking to the stage yesterday. Now, remember, this obviously is election year, and most of the public announcements that Prime Minister Modi is making anywhere right now, even the Independence Day speech, is targeted towards the election sort of, you know, excitement. But thankfully, I think at the B20 meeting yesterday, the election agenda was not as much.
For a while.
For to actually take that leadership, global leadership, statesmanship when it came to affairs which are bothering the world at large, not just India. So, 3 very critical, you know, announcements that came, not announcements, more of motions, if I could say, by Prime Minister Modi. Number one, of course, what we discussed right now, that arriving at a net carbon zero framework and arriving at a point where India and the world can collaborate, come together, and be able to establish very, very clear-cut guiding principles to cut out emissions, right? And this is through use of alternate energy fuels like hydrogen, and this is also through electric vehicles, electric mobility, and India's own roadmap towards achieving that. But more, I think, critical for for the world right now to partner with India and for India to seek best practices from the world are two aspects. One, of course, is regulation of artificial intelligence, and the other is regulation of cryptocurrencies. Now, on artificial intelligence, specifically, Prime Minister Modi stated that there is enough and more evidence to suggest that there is bias when it comes to artificial intelligence engines spewing out data, spewing out information. Now, in addition to that, of course, there is this need right now, and a very clear-cut need for AI to be regulated in India and in the world over. And there are some models, some tools available globally, but Prime Minister Modi's call really was for the world to come together and work together when it comes to drafting this framework or these guidelines when it comes to regulating AI. India on its
AI
own course.
specifically, I think what stood out for me in that dialogue was the hegemony of developed countries on AI and new technology. I think it was very ambitious and also out of the ordinary for the Prime Minister to acknowledge that we lag as far as new technology is concerned, and therefore the need to push and ensure that AI and new technologies are not hegemonized by developed countries.
So, I think, Shweta, on that, my only take is that it's pure play market practices, and India did have a lead over the rest of the world when it came to IT services, and India was among the very few countries back then in the 1980s that invested greatly in entrepreneurial skills, entrepreneurship, and setting up of these back offices for global companies to do more efficient business using India's IT prowess. So India had its leadership there. Cut to 20 years later, India had its leadership when it came to pure play back office functions like BPOs and KPOs. So all the processing work, all the calls, all the knowledge, research, all of that would be done back home in India. Cut to another 15, 18, 20 years later, IT products. So look at the startup ecosystem in India. India has been able to build some very, very robust startups and which have now become large-scale companies in their own right. Many of them listed, some listed in India, some even listed abroad or have been acquired by international stakeholders. I'm talking specifically about Flipkart in this case. So we have been able to model a lot of our startups looking at ideas from the West, and we've been able to create startups using technology in the product space which have solved a very specific India problem. Look at all the quick commerce companies that have mushroomed over the last 5 years or so. There isn't enough evidence of such companies existing anywhere else in the world. So I think asking for the world to slow down on its AI development, AI progress, for India to play catch up is an unfair ask. So there is hegemony of the West right now because the West understood the implications of AI, was able to invest at the right time in AI and build these large learning models which now not just them but even developing countries like India have been exposed to. Of course, there is a resource issue attached to that as well, which is around building semiconductors.
I want to come to that as well. Very interesting approach from the Prime Minister. He also talked about how many countries, I think he was specifically alluding to China, which has most of the rare earth critical minerals. And he talked about how certain countries have them and are trying not to let them part ways with it, or cartelization, essentially trying to block exports of essential earth minerals that India does not have at this point in time, which could perhaps hinder some of our semiconductor capability.
So I think, there is China, a very, very dominant player when it comes to owning and controlling these rare earth minerals, but China is not alone. There are other countries also in Europe, in Western Asia, in Africa, which are houses to these rare earth minerals. It's just a function of being able to strike those partnerships and build those supply chains to be able to extract and import from there. But broadly, I think, India's AI journey has also begun. We've seen all our top 4, 5 IT players announcing their own AI plans, their own AI ambitions, some of them even rolling out AI services or AI-based services to their clients abroad. Look at Wipro's X360, if I'm not mistaken. Look at Infosys's Topaz. So, you know, we have all our large IT companies already well invested in AI. Now, of course, AI requires tons of processing power, and that processing power will need GPUs, and those GPUs run on semiconductor chips, and those semiconductor chips need to be made in India. Right. Broadly, that's the plan. But we've seen action there as well. We've seen Micron wanting to make investments, Allied Materials wanting to make investments. We've seen Foxconn already making investments. We've seen Vedanta, even though the fall off with Foxconn has happened, looking for technology partners to make those investments. So I think the AI story will pick up.
Right.
Now, I want to cut quickly to the other important issue that Prime Minister spoke about at B20 yesterday, which was again around this framework on controlling cryptocurrencies. Now, crypto in India has been a bad word. Cryptos have been looked at with disdain. People frown upon cryptocurrencies, and there isn't really any regulation or any robust regulation anywhere in the world when it comes to cryptocurrencies. India's fear with cryptocurrency is that who regulates it? Is it going to be the market regulator SEBI? Is it going to be the central bank RBI? Is it going to be Ministry of Finance? Since it's a digital product, is it going to be MeitY or is it going to be TRAI? We don't know. So I think there isn't enough understanding right now on how do you let a new asset class like cryptocurrency, do what it's meant to do without hampering national interest. And a major fear that India has is in the absence of this regulation, anybody could be transferring money using cryptocurrencies, bypassing official channels where they are either tax liable or exceeding the limited remittance scheme, the liberalized remittance scheme of $250,000 per year, and be able to remit money outside India without the Indian authorities getting to know anything about where that money went. So a crypto global framework is something that Prime Minister Modi has proposed. Will we see this shaping up within the period of India's presidency at G20? Very, very unlikely, because it's just about 2 weeks or so, before India's presidency ends. But at least pushing for this and hoping for a global framework, a global standard around crypto to come up is something that Prime Minister Modi said yesterday.
All right, and let's quickly listen in to what Prime Minister exactly said at that B20 event.
साथियों, आज जब दुनिया के बड़े बिजनेस लीडर्स यहाँ जुटे हैं, तब हमारे सामने कुछ और बड़े सवाल भी हैं। इन सवालों के उत्तर से ही बिजनेस और ह्यूमैनिटी का भविष्य तय होगा, और इनके जवाब के लिए आपसी सहयोग जरूरी है। चाहे क्लाइमेट चेंज का विषय हो, एनर्जी सेक्टर की क्राइसिस हो, फूड सप्लाई चेन का असंतुलन हो, वाटर सिक्योरिटी हो, साइबर सिक्योरिटी हो, ऐसे कितने ही विषय हैं जो बिजनेस पर बड़ा इंपैक्ट डालते हैं। इससे मुकाबला करने के लिए हमें अपने साझा प्रयास बढ़ाने होंगे। समय के साथ अब हमारे सामने ऐसे विषय भी जुड़ते जा रहे हैं जिनके बारे में 10-15 साल पहले कोई सोच भी नहीं सकता था।
All right, Prime Minister there, of course, talking about the new age, the new era, and therefore new problems and new challenges around which framework, regulation, all of that is essential. Staying on with new framework and new taxes perhaps that are being imposed, a story that is coming by the way of rice imports and rice exports, rather, not rice imports, we don't need that just as yet, we have bountiful of rice in India, but rice exports. Weeks after banning exports of non-basmati rice, the government has now come to an understanding that people perhaps could be bypassing this by pushing out rice that is, non-exclusive basmati and calling it basmati. So there is now a clause that you cannot export rice at less than $1,200 a ton. If it's basmati, that's the price.
Yeah. So even basmati rice that is being exported at less than $1,200 per ton, dollars per ton, is not allowed anymore. So all those people who were playing fair also will have to be
No,
part
but
of it.
essentially, I think government has come
so
to this
there was a
understanding that
lo-
this is the minimum price at which basmati should be sold.
but there was, of course, so they have very clear reports that there was a lot of misrepresentation when it came to exporters who were pushing non-basmati rice, and government has gotten aggressive when they have to in their fight against inflation. Now, if you see a timeline, and they have had 2 bad years, so they started imposing export bans on wheat way back as last year.
Right.
This year, since June, if my records are right, yeah, June, the stock holding limit on tur and dal was imposed. In June itself, stock holding limits on wheat was imposed. Now, these are measures to curb fight inflation. 40% export duty on onions, that came after later on. 20% duty on parboiled fine rice, that came. Ban on white rice exports came in July itself, and this is the latest one.
Right.
That $1,200 below cost price of basmati rice
Cannot be
exported.
exported. Right. And essentially, this is all to not just ensure that there is enough supply of rice within India, but also to ensure that people who are perhaps subverting the law by selling non-basmati rice at less than $1,200 a ton will not be able to do so anymore. I'm just a little worried about what happens of the global rice, whether there's going to be enough supply, whether there's going to be a shortage, because India is a major exporter and a major player when it comes to rice in the world.
So, Shweta, what do they tell us in airlines? In case of an emergency, wear the oxygen mask yourself before offering help to others, right?
Okay.
So, I think when it comes to meeting domestic demand, the responsibility of the government of India is to Indian citizens, right? And Indian citizens residing in India. So, I think very simply put, of course, solve your own problem first, and thereafter, if there is surplus capacity available, use it to benefit your neighbors, use it to benefit your friends, but not at the cost of your own people having to pay more money. This becomes even more prominent, obviously, in the run-up to elections, because inflation, food inflation, is something that impacts everybody. You can't be in a situation where you're letting rice export outside of the country at whatever best competitive prices at the cost of Indians paying exorbitantly high prices for essentials like basmati.
Now, I'm not sure how much rice prices have varied in the last 1 year. Amit, if you have any idea of whether rice prices were also hiked, whether there was a shortage of rice supply.
Was not double digits. It
right.
was in single digits, late single digits, about 9.5, 9.8% on an average.
So this was more of a preemptive measure.
No, but even 9% is fairly high when you compare it to overall headline inflation at about 7.4%. Rice inflation, cereal inflation, dal inflation, all of that coming at about late single digits is a fairly high inflation number. So the idea is to contain inflation in any case down to 4%. Within that, food inflation becomes a very, very essential component. But any rate higher than the regular core inflation rate on a particular item, which is an essential, is a problem for the government and needs to be hemmed in.
And I think yes.
And rice became dearer also because there's a 15% jump in rice exports this year, which is quite unprecedented. So obviously, either there is a scarcity or the exporters are getting better prices because of the scarcity. So that had to be curbed because
it had to be curbed. But staying on with import and export, another area where you can see India getting more protectionist is as far as imposing import levy on a lot of products is concerned, including your palm tops, your laptops, and also camera phones. All of that is not going to augur well with a lot of countries, including the US, which has now come on record to say it's going to be harmful for a lot of companies.
So US is definitely not happy, and rightly so, because there are enough and more US companies, Dell for example, Apple for example, which are selling computers, tablets, phones, etc. in India. Dell not phones, but Apple even phones. So US companies are obviously unhappy with this precedent. But what has also happened, and staying with laptop import bans, I think what has also happened is that India's overall FDI inflow has also gone down, and laptops have been one of the major sort of points which have impacted FDI inflow into India. So US not happy there with India's stand on laptop import, and at the same time overall for Q1 April, May, June of this year, inflation numbers also seeing a fairly large decline as compared to last year. Though sequentially between Jan, Feb, March, which is Q4 of last financial year, and April, May, June, Q1 of this year, we've seen a little rise in FDI, but on a year-to-year basis, Amit has the numbers, FDI story in India not looking good at all.
Not looking good at all.
Yeah.
Declined by as much as 35% on a year-on-year basis in the first quarter of this year.
34%.
Okay.
But it's slightly higher than what it was in the quarter previous to that. That's Q4 23. So computers, as Karthik mentioned, came down from 9.3 billion to a mere 968 million.
Okay.
Services from 8.7 billion to 2.5 billion. Trading, that is of course a part of the interest rate hikes, 4.792 million to a mere 525. Automobiles have come down almost by a quarter, by three times, from 1.9 billion to a mere 405 million. So these are the major sectors where the FDI has come down, partly because of the funding winter, partly because of the interest rates, and partly because of overall looming depression.
All right. So the only question that I have at this point, is this a cause of worry, Karthik?
Definitely. I think, you need investments to come into the country. You don't just need Indian companies to invest in India, you also need global companies to invest in India. Now, what has also happened, Shweta, in this whole run-up to FDI slowing down has been this question of angel tax, which we had discussed a few months back. This year in the budget, 1st Feb 2023, in the budget speech, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman had said that there is going to be imposition of angel tax. Now, there is a funding winter that Amit just spoke about, and we are seeing a slowdown of investments coming into Indian startups. But then this angel tax also impacts not just startups, but also impacts companies headquartered internationally, global brands who have a presence or who have an office in India. So there are countries and there is investment into India which has seen some sort of a dip when it comes to this angel tax issue also coming up. And add to that, of course, it's always a two-way street. If you're stopping exports, if you are making your imports, more difficult for exporters outside of India, and you add taxes on FDI, overall growth does get impacted. So, I think government will have to walk this tightrope right now on ensuring there is growth, there is equitable growth, there is growth, and yet manage inflation and yet manage the election season.
All right. It's going to be a tough call. Yes, Amit.
Last 2 years have been tough, but also let's see the years before that, there was a sizable jump in FDI. So probably that comparison is little difficult to meet. And two, I believe the term that was coined for India by the ex-president of the US is a tariff monster. That is probably true right now.
All right, lot of tariffs.
I would not
place.
agree with
call
Trump.
it monster.
on any count.
That was a term he had coined for India, probably.
Okay, well, to each his own, but moving on, and a story that I think augurs well for all Indians, and that is coming by the way of 9 years of Jan Dhan Yojana, banking the unbanked. On 28th of August, 2014, after coming to power, Prime Minister Modi started a process, and the government started a process of financial inclusion, launched the Jan Dhan Yojana as we see it now, banking the unbanked, ensuring that the direct benefit is transferred directly in the accounts of the people to plug the leakages. How far have we come?
Shweta, I think what is really fascinating in this whole story of Jan Dhan Yojana was this coinage of a term called the Jan Trinity, Jan Dhan Aadhaar Mobile. And I think that's been a fabulous story. We'll come to the data, we'll come to the numbers, but I think it's been a fabulous story when it comes to not just banking the unbanked through Jan Dhan, but also doing a complete KYC using Aadhaar and linking it to a unique mobile number using the mobile penetration or the data penetration that happened in India. So Jan Trinity, I think, has been one of the key success areas of the government over the last 9 years. Let's look at the data. When Jan Dhan Yojana was announced by Prime Minister, and once it took off on 28th of August 2014, in that year we saw, not a small number. We saw about 150 odd million bank accounts get opened. But the criticism back then was about these zero balance accounts open. These zero balance accounts technically meant that you could put in any amount of money, not a minimum threshold required, and yet you saw while accounts had opened, many of them, as high as 40% of them, actually had zero balances.
Money.
They had no balances. That figure has come down in percentage and in absolute terms as well. So while the total number of bank accounts has ballooned now to about 500 million, the number of zero balance accounts has halved to about 40 million. So from 80 million zero balance accounts on a base of 150 odd million total Jan Dhan accounts, the number has come to 40 million zero balance accounts on a base of about 500 million. Look at what it does to the overall banking system. Right now, these Jan Dhan accounts, at whatever average balances, hold about 2 trillion rupees, 2 lakh crore rupees in the formal banking ecosystem, which can be deployed for overall infrastructure development, growth, whatever avenues the government wants to use it as. Now, add to that, there have also been other benefits of the Jan Dhan Aadhaar mobile trinity, the JAM trinity, which, like you mentioned, is the DBT, direct beneficiary transfers. 62 million or something is the number of citizens who now avail of these direct benefits from the government. No middleman, no reason to doubt
queuing up at the banks,
no queuing up at banks,
yes.
no papers, and no sort of greasing hands to get that money. It's coming straight to your account using the JAM trinity. And this whole digitization, RuPay cards, 300 million plus RuPay cards issued to sort of formalize the transaction space, cut down on cash. So I think we've got to look at the Jan Dhan Aadhaar mobile trinity and the Jan Dhan 9 years of Jan Dhan in this entirety, and not just about opening of bank accounts or zero bank balance accounts.
Interesting, because these have also been 9 years where a lot of people who've been relatively unbanked, and this is where the story matters to the common man. Not so much about how many bank accounts have been opened, how much money these bank accounts have, but that you can now transfer this money to perhaps a rickshawala or the maid who's working at your home. So the people who were relatively unbanked for a very long time now, they all have a bank account, and which essentially means that less cash in hand, more money in the bank accounts, more savings, and so on and so forth.
And
so
which is what we've seen, the 2,000 rupee taken away from the circulation has not really impacted too many people.
Absolutely.
So there is at least visual evidence, if nothing else, that there is lesser cash in circulation.
It's been extremely helpful, but we've run out of time. In fact, we've overshot our limit today discussing 9 years of Jan Dhan. It's all good well for the government. There've been hits, there've been misses. Hopefully, we'll come back on that story very, very soon. But that's all we have in this bulletin. Thanks for watching.
With all this gear, you must be wondering if I'm climbing a mountain. Well, let me give you a wider look of this place. This is Asia's largest mountain of shame.
A mountain of waste, almost the height of the Qutub Minar.
When you enter capital cities of some of the biggest countries in the world, you don't have 3 garbage mountains waiting to welcome you, depending on whichever side of the city you enter from.
The thing is that a lot of times we talk about landfills only when there's a fire at the landfill. You need to understand that a landfill is at fire almost throughout the year. It's only when the firefighter